So again, thank you very much for coming. I'm excited to get this project off the ground for this phase. So next slide. Um, so sorry, I'm trying to arrange my screens here. We've got a packed agenda. I am hoping that we can get you out maybe a little early. But this meeting today will be a lot of review, but we also want to start brainstorming sort of how to move forward for the next year. So this is sort of how we've set it up for the next couple of hours. Next slide. So we're going to start with a review, an overview. Many of you participated in phase one of this project. Next slide. Which ended last June of 2023. And we're thrilled that most of you are back. So we've got a great team who's been working on this, working on a flood model and just working together to sort of prioritize some regional strategies to better adapt to climate change across the region. Next slide. So this is a diagram of sort of what we're trying to accomplish here in phase two. So we've got sort of myriad activities going on, but we are, this is part of the Municipal Climate Collaborative. And through the collaborative, we're really trying to facilitate communication across town borders. All of you are facing the same climate impacts, but each of you is going to have your own local strategies to combat that. But because we're all facing the same thing, I think it makes sense that we work together. It can be more cost effective, and you know, the water isn't stopping at the border. We're also enhancing the watershed-wide flood model, and we'll be presenting that to a steering committee next week, as well as a public meeting on June 11th, and we'll send out information about that following this meeting. So we've enhanced it. We've done some field work to gather some additional data around infrastructure, and we've modeled some additional scenarios. For FY25, we're going to be looking at some specific subwatersheds and modeling specific interventions there to sort of see how they work and how they might be replicated across the region. We've also assembled a community advisory group of residents, primarily recruited from those working with or representing community-based organizations. And the idea there is to really elevate residential concerns about climate impacts, and you know, really understand and educate them about what types of resilience building opportunities there are across the region, and try to encourage them to bring that into their own work in their communities and build capacity to engage around these projects in the future. And then finally, we're also engaged in general community education. I think a lot of people hear about climate change and the impacts and the gloom and doom, and we really want to make sure that we're letting people know about adaptation and the opportunities to build more resilient communities. And hopefully that will help in your work as you propose various projects in your own town. Next slide. So what we did to come up in phase one to come up with the framework document, and actually I wanted to link that. I'm going to put that in the chat. Oh, it's already there.
Yeah, Bruno, she shared it.
So what we did over the last year was the project team and some of you and other municipal officials identified and reviewed some of the existing plans you've already put together in your municipalities. So we looked at hazard mitigation plans, MVP plans, open space and recreation plans, anything that we could find that might touch on climate impacts and adaptation. As a group, we identified the top shared concerns across municipalities, and we met several times to prioritize those concerns. Um, and the end result was this proposed framework, which again is linked in the chat. And really the idea is sort of to try to map out a way for municipalities to work together. And we realize that there isn't an employee in each town whose job it is to work across town lines. And so we'd really like to facilitate that um, and, um, and help you take advantage of some of these regional efforts and funding opportunities to get some of these adaptations put in place. Next slide. So not unlike the Neponset Stormwater Partnership, we'd like to get you together. So the vision that was agreed on by the partners last year was to work together to enhance resilience, facilitate coordination and implementing strategies and planning, and share best practices, which again is what we hope is accomplished through the Neponset Stormwater Partnership. But again, because you're all facing the same impacts, it would be great if we didn't have to reinvent the wheel in every single town. Next slide. The objectives that everybody came up with are included here. So really, again, making sure those partnerships are close, making sure the strategies implemented meet justice goals, to make sure that we're really preparing those communities who are going to be disproportionately impacted by climate change. Collectively going after funding. There's a lot of funding out there. A lot of it is geared towards cooperative projects. So we want to make sure that that we're working together efficiently. And we also want to support implementation of local and regional projects across the watershed to make sure that these adaptations are actually happening when you're ready to implement them. Next slide. So the framework also includes a draft letter of commitment. And the participants agreed on it, but what ultimately we would like to come up with is a commitment that municipalities will actually sign on to at the end of this project. But we thought that this commitment that was agreed on last year could serve as sort of a guide as we work towards really solidifying this collaborative over the next year and a half. Next slide. And you'll notice in the framework, I think it's section 4.2 of the document, the project team and partner municipalities organized some of the priority strategies that had been identified through these existing plans by the climate impact addressed by them. And that may be one way that we want to talk about these things as we move forward. But I wanted to present just another example of how we might organize some of our discussions over the next year, and tried to group them by action and strategy. So for this, and this is strictly for the sake of the discussion today, it's just another example of how we might categorize these. So every town is looking to improve infrastructure. Some of the the individual priority actions were to upgrade aging, undersized infrastructure like culverts, removing dams, protecting transportation systems and transportation routes, particularly evacuation routes, incorporating green infrastructure into public projects, um, to flood-proof buildings, particularly those critical buildings owned by the towns, replace septic systems that are located within the 500-year floodplain and connect those buildings up to sewer, ensuring adequate cooling centers across town for those who don't have it in their homes, and to properly identify and equip emergency shelters for those extreme weather events. Some examples of some restoration and open space preservation priorities are the preservation and creation of wetlands, both for flood storage and for water quality improvement. Restoration of wetlands and floodplains for the same reasons. Preserving open space and parks, and then incorporating flood control measures into any new parks that are created to make sure that that they have got a dual use and can provide co-benefits. To add landscaping and retrofit existing parking and other paved areas to increase the amount of green space. And removal of dams came under here as ecological restoration. All of the towns identified at least some regulatory updates that they were interested in pursuing. So, for example, regulations to minimize the creation of impervious surfaces during construction and development and redevelopment, updating zoning and parking regulations and site plan reviews to preserve contiguous open space and incorporate a minimum percentage of pervious surfaces in developments. Updating stormwater bylaws, potentially including a stormwater enterprise fund to make sure that there's dedicated funding to do all the maintenance and upgrades that are necessary to prepare us for the future. Require consideration of future precipitation data when evaluating stormwater structures that are required for development and redevelopment projects. And the protection of floodplains, looking not just at the 100-year floodplain, but beyond to the 500-year floodplain, which will be affected, excuse me, much more in the future with climate-driven precipitation. And then finally, I grouped planning and communications. All of the towns identified sort of the need to better assess flood risks and infrastructure needs. And hopefully the flood model is helping with that, and we'll discuss that more at the public meeting and the steering committee meeting for the flood model. Establishing regional committees to coordinate with infrastructure organizations. Establishing regional communications to make sure that residents and businesses are aware of any issues and concerns with water supplies, water quality, road closures, evacuation routes, and shelter locations. Identifying opportunities to share resources with neighboring communities, whether it's water quality monitoring or stormwater maintenance equipment. Identifying high value land for potential acquisition in the future. So making sure that those plans are in place, particularly when there's contiguous protected open space nearby. To identify hazardous materials in town and assess spill risk with climate-driven storms. Conducting robust community education to make sure people are aware of not just climate resilience building opportunities, but also best practices. What can they do at home? You know, how are businesses storing hazardous materials, and how is everybody preparing for extreme weather? And plans for tree planting and tree protection. Was another popular one that was mentioned by most towns. So later on, and Van will talk about this in more detail, but when we get into our breakout groups, I don't want you to feel tied to any particular organizational structure, whether it's the one in the framework or the one I'm presenting here. We're just trying to illustrate some of the different ways you might think about a work plan for the collaborative. And so you can think about whether you even agree with how we've grouped these. And is there, is there a strategy that's missing? Is there a better way for municipalities to be looking at this based on different departments, areas of expertise, etc. But just wanted to present this as an alternative to what you've seen in the document. And I think that's going to end it for this look back, this recap portion. Does anybody have any questions about what we've done to date? All right, there will be plenty of opportunity to ask additional questions. If you think of anything as we go through this, please feel free to stick it in the chat if you don't want to raise your hand. And again, there will be plenty of opportunity. We're going to be talking about a lot of information today, and just wanted to get everybody on the same page as we prepare for phase 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, so I'll spend the next few minutes just talking through what's next for this upcoming years. Again, if you have questions about the draft frameworks, what we've done to date, please add to the chat, as well as whatever I will be presenting next. So let's look ahead. We did a lot of work, but also there are a lot more to do. So y'all in luck. There are just a lot of opportunities for you to provide additional feedback and add your touch to this framework or documents for the collaborative together. So in terms of goals, the project team identified 2 key one to get going. One is determining the membership criteria, level of efforts, near and long-term priorities based on what have been identified or workshopped in phase 1. Membership criteria, thinking about who else in your municipality should be part of this conversation of the collaborative decision making, implementation, and level of efforts. We will have a few meetings in this upcoming year, months and things like that, but is that enough? Should we have subgroup? So these are some questions keep in mind, and we can further discuss in our breakout sessions in a few minutes. And then, of course, we have identified strategies. Some of them, many municipalities maybe have started thinking about that. Some may have already started initiating, implementing. So I understand, we're all in different levels too. So kind of what would be your municipality's near and long-term activities, and how does that fit in to the collaborative framework? And then together, what are some of the regional priorities that the collaborative can set for all your municipalities can kind of work together as well? So just keep those in mind. And then, of course, by the end of this fiscal year, or by June 2025, we hope to have a work plan developed, and that all of you can sign on to and bring that back to your municipality and help and implement as you see fit. So what is a work plan? I think we have different definitions and versions of that. So we're open up to for your feedback and thoughts and suggestions as well of what the collaborative's work plan for this upcoming year, 3 to 5 years, should look like. And I have some example I can show later as well. And we can kind of, this is really flexible as well. So we're open up for discussions and for anything that you would like to see in your collaborative's work plan. And then just key expectation to be part of the collaborative, the steering committee, which you're all part of, is will actively participating in developing the collaborative's work plan, identify priorities, and then after this one, there are 4 more meetings in this upcoming months to continue this conversation. And then ultimately, in order to make this effective together as a collaborative, we're hoping that you can help each other as well as lead by example and implementing the priorities identified in this work plan or documents that you will put together as well. So for this, I just want to show that we're not alone in this. And as you probably know, and some may have been participating in some other collaborative as well. In our local region, there's the Charles River Climate Compact. There's the Metro Mayors Coalition as well. And then as you can see across the country, there are many others. So we can definitely tap into their best practices, their lesson learned, and figure out as well as kind of borrow anything that works in their region, and adding our own flares to our collaborative as well. But just want to show you that there are resources out there that we could pull from to support our own collaborative. And then again, going back to what do we want the work plan to look like, which is one of the questions we'll talk more in detail later. But just want to show you two examples. This one is local by the Charles River Climate Compact, and they recently did a strategic plan. Radoshi, if you can, could you add the two links of the examples to the chat so folks can take a look as well? But this one, similar to any action plan, strategic plans are goals, identify strategies, and then this is what I would consider an implementation blueprint or details where we'll dive deeper into sort of, what are the next steps, what are the time frames, who should be involved, who are the key implementers, where are the potential funding sources to consider, and then just tracking progress to see how the collaborative together have moved along, in the next 3 to 5 years. I kept saying that, but of course, together we can determine that too, like what is your timeline to make sure that it's feasible and practical. And another one is across the country in the Bay Area, they have actually developed a work plan specifically. And I personally like this a lot, just for the ease of reading and also not to be too overwhelming with the long list of laundry items. But in here, they identify for the 2-year work plan kind of key areas. One is on resilience and one is on kind of carbon-free decarbonization, mitigation work, and identify top regional projects that they will address or work on together. And then on the right, I kind of include a snapshot of their breakdown, their work, the details of each of the projects, and providing sort of like who would be working on it. Here they have partners and consultants as well. Descriptions of what it should look like. What is the goal of these priority projects or strategies? What's the timeline, but estimated budget, as well as the activities suggested. And I like this because, like I mentioned, I think municipalities may be in a different phases. Might have touched on some of the associated work or similar work. Some might be still in planning phase, some might be ready for construction already. And so kind of having a list of key steps to achieve this together too. And then allowing sort of, this is like the recipe, and you can kind of make it your own for each municipalities as you see fit. That will allow some customization or flexibility as well. But at least kind of provide a framework of how to go about addressing or implementing a strategy or a project that you identify together. So before we break into breakout sessions and we can share that a bit more, I just want to pause and see if you have any question about what we did in phase 1, as well as what we're anticipating for phase 2 in this next 12 months. Or any thoughts, initial thoughts of what's happening? Okay. All right. We'll talk more about it in our breakout session. Do you want to talk through the breakout sessions, Carrie, or do you want me to? Oh, you're on mute.
I said I had you listed, but I'm happy to do it.
Sorry, I can do it.
That's okay.
So we're gonna go to breakout sessions. Ian will help put us into, I think we'll have two breakout sessions then. We'll have a facilitator and a note taker. We use the Miro board. There are four key questions. So in the next 30 minutes, would love your participation to provide your inputs and ideas, looking at who should also be here, who should help, from the municipality to sign off on these commitments. What should the work plan look like, and how should we go about categorizing these strategies that you see in the framework? All right, so with that, we'll have 30 minutes. We'll reconvene and report out. So make sure in your group to have a designated reporter as well. All right, with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ian.
All right, so I'm gonna stop the recording, yes?
Yep.
Okay.